My name is Daryl Easlea, and I'm delighted to be in Southend Libraries talking about my new book, Whatever Happened to Slade. Informative, revelatory, and fun. I was obsessed with books as a kid. I was the classic, though I wasn't an only child, I was a much younger child. And before the days of the internet, and even telly wasn't on all the time at that time, I just read. I found books to read, magazines to look at, whatever I could sort of lay my hands on. And I became quite obsessed with music books very early on because they just seemed to be so interesting. And the world seemed so sort of alien to growing up in a village outside Southend. The glamour and the glitz and the stories and the haircuts as well. That was quite a big part of it. So that really inspired me to read. And then all my sort of education has been English and history based. So yes, don't read as much as I'd love to now, but because I'm writing a lot. But you have to read a lot to write a lot. I really believe that. Slade have always fascinated me, and I was asked by my publisher. The book was in motion, and then the author dropped out, and I'd written several books for my publisher, and he said, "Would you like to do it?" And Slade were one of the first posters I had on my wall as a kid, and I've always been fascinated by them. So it was an absolute pleasure to get in and to, I spent about 5 or 6 years putting it together to really sort of inhabit that world to tell the story. The favourite book I've written will always be the next one. But I think the book that I still look at and love is my book on chic called Everybody Dance, Chic and the Politics of Disco, which was my first book. And I think most people don't really think that they have a book in them. And I really didn't know if I had. And I'd written articles, and then I was asked if I would do it, and I suggested it. And it was tremendous fun because all of my books, they are labours of love. Music books are not going to be up there with Richard Osman and J.K. Rowling, but they serve a really important purpose to sort of catalogue a period of time. And I really felt that chic and disco music was very, very disparaged at that point. I wrote it 20 years ago now, the first version of it. And it was fascinating to find out how many sort of subtexts there are in disco, and how many sort of people came through disco and how important disco was, whilst also being really, really good to dance to. And I think anything that makes you happy and makes you dance, even though a lot of those songs are really sad and really powerful, there is nothing greater, I think, than dancing in so many ways. Love and peace, and that's about it, really. Love, peace, and dancing. Man. I always love it when people read my work and say, "Oh, I'd never thought that," or "I'll listen to that group again," or "I'll read or see that film again," because I think it's always interesting to hear another view and an opinion of something you've known for ages. And I think Slade were a really good case in point of that, because they're a group that lots of people are aware of the Christmas record and aware they were sort of really big in the 70s for a while, and then that was it. But their whole story is, as filmic as, say, Queen's and some of the bigger bands that have made it. So I think when people sort of realise there's a lot more to an artist than they thought, and hopefully through the research I do and the people I speak to, that's what my books can give. It was very easy how to name my book. Slade, in 1977, made an album called Whatever Happened to Slade, which was a tremendously apposite title at that time, because someone had actually written that as graffiti in London, because Slade had become so famous here, their manager thought they could go to America and become famous there. And it just didn't translate. And they spent 2 years in America, coming back, releasing things, but that sort of constant touring they did and appearing at not one, but 2 Southend theatres on that time. You know, they were in everyone's face. Then they went away. And it was a bit like, in those days, right, okay, what happened to them? So by calling their album that, they sort of really did quite shoot themselves in the foot, because everyone thought, yeah, whatever happened to Slade? At that time, punk came along, and that was it. They were sort of over. So I thought what's interesting now is obviously people sort of say, well, what happened to Slade, the Christmas record? You know, some people may remember there was jokes about them on the Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer show where they had Slade at home, but that was about it. So whatever happened to Slade, when the whole world went crazy, with 2 E's, because they had this fascinating thing of spelling, bad grammar was a thing. And there's a chapter in my book called Misspelt Youth. So I thought I'd do that as well. So whatever happened to Slade when the whole world went crazy? I used to come to Westcliff Library when I was a child, and my auntie Doreen worked behind the counter. Not my real auntie, but one of those aunties when you're younger. And it was a place of such wonder and such incredible modernism with that zigzag roof. It reminded me of a small version of the Bliss Pavilion. That's not really interesting about me, but it's interesting about my younger self revelling in Westcliff Library. My favourite book is the Beatles' complete recording sessions by a gentleman called Mark Lewison, which came out in 1988. And it was the first time that the Beatles' work had been sort of forensically looked at with the involvement of EMI and Abbey Road and the Beatles. So you were seeing the studio tapes and the sessions. Incredibly geeky, but you sort of guessed the ballpark I'm in, really. And I often say that would be my my Desert Island book, because it's just, even though it's out of date a little bit now, more information has come through. It's still a fascinating read, and I think the Beatles, when you think of sort of basically 7.5 years of recording, you know, to go from Love Me Do to Strawberry Fields within just over 3 years is like, good heavens, and Conquer the World in the same time. Well, when we say the world, America, Britain, and most of Europe, and make 2 feature films and write songs that our children still know today. You think, well, you know, it's a fascinating story to have captured. I use my local library when I can. I love going into my local library. I'm very lucky to live in Leigh-on-Sea. I do very much like having a little look around. It's the most beautiful building, which was the rectory at the time. And it's one of those things, like with a lot of really beautiful old buildings, that it sort of almost gets taken for granted. It's just sort of jammed in next to the block of flats and the children's playground. But you can imagine in the day when that was commanding the cliffs on its own. So I'm a huge fan of Leigh Library. I loved the old Southend Library, which is not the old Southend Library, but the one that opened in 1974. I was there on opening day. I couldn't believe it. It was the most exciting thing that ever seemed to happen. And the little cafe around the back, cup of tea in there, the lecture theatre, many happy memories there. And studying for my A-levels there. Just, used to go up and sit on those big desks up the top with a desk with a ledge. And, it was one of those times of feeling grown up. So I love libraries. Libraries give us power, of course, as the Manic Street Preachers sang, which came from their local library, I think in Maesteg or Blackwood or wherever. So use them, fight for them. They must never go. So if you are around on the 26th of September, I'm going to be doing a short presentation, shortish, about the book. I'm going to be using a flip chart and marker pens. I'm so excited. I haven't used one of those for about 20 years. And one of my favourite turns, Tuppeny Bunters, are going to be playing, and they'll be doing a few Slade numbers as well. There'll be copies of my book for sale. And if you're really lucky, I might sign one for you. So the 26th, all the details are in this link that could well be below my finger now.